So as you can see, I've got my sort of silhouette, the outline of my rooster drawn once again. I have already gone through the 2 steps of the drawing method on the outside with the gridding technique, which is the first one is just to kind of do a very loose outline, but still make it as accurate as you can. And then you go back through all those lines again, kind of finessing and tweaking and making things even more accurate. So now what I'm going to do is in this video I'm going to go ahead and start on some of these internal lines that are part of his face, part of the little red thing above his head, the red thing below his beak, different things like that, so that you can see a little bit more of how the gridding process works. Now once again I am going to go ahead and start with the beak as I mentioned in the previous video, simply because it falls directly on this sort of cross section. And just like I did with the outline, what I'm going to do is kind of a loose line, still trying to be pretty accurate, but also knowing that I am going to come in and I'm going to be changing things. So this part of his beak kind of comes up. The highest part is actually right about here. And then it comes down, comes out, and then kind of comes across and down to where the corner of his mouth, the little downturn there, is towards this corner of the square. And then it comes over a bit, comes up where the red thing goes, the giblet or whatever, and then comes across, and then down into the rest of his beak, right about here. And then this side, because there's a shadow, I could see the edge of the beak, so I went ahead and drew that. But then the outer part of his beak kind of comes from here, so it's on this line, and then comes over, and then has a bit of an angle here, and then into that downturn. And then the same thing, it's got a little space for the red area, and then comes down almost to a point, kind of level here and here, and then just kind of comes up. So that would be sort of the outline of the beak with the first look. Then I'm going to go ahead and focus on going out from the beak. Now at this point you absolutely could go ahead and do a second layer on the beak with a little bit more accuracy and detail. I find that it's more helpful to go ahead and get everything drawn at this level and then go back in and do more detail on everything all at once. That's just what works best for me, but for each person it could be different. So definitely think about what you want to do, what feels the most natural. For me, it feels more natural to go ahead and draw all of it and then go back in and make all of my corrections. So this one comes down a little bit more and then starts to go over. A little less than halfway across there. And then on this side, starts here. Comes in almost parallel with the vertical line, but not quite. And then comes out and touches this line. Maybe a little further down. And then just barely goes sort of across this corner. Dips down a little bit. And then comes curving across to this corner, and then part of it goes into that corner. So then the outer part comes across this corner a little bit. Comes up pretty much parallel with this grid line, comes out just a little bit here, and then back into about right there. this side comes more about here, and then comes out, almost touches the grid line there, and then just kind of dips down and over, sort of off of my grid there. Then sort of the interior line here, still working on that little red thing. So then this kind of comes into that. So notice that I am making my lines really light, especially at this point, because I know that a lot of these lines might not be completely accurate, so I might be doing some changing here soon. So the best thing to do is go ahead and just keep everything really light until you are at the point where you've got it pretty accurate. And even then, because I'm going to be using watercolor, I don't want to make any of this too dark. So now I'm just adding that little white part that's around his neck. And it's kind of angular in here, but then it does kind of touch on this corner, and then part of it goes behind the red part, and then this side comes down about to the halfway point of the square, and then comes over just above the corner. So that it's kind of like that. And then this needs to be just a smidge further in. And I am going to go ahead and erase that. So then on this side, there's a little bit more of a red thing that comes out right about here. And then comes back into this corner and goes behind the other red thing that I've already drawn. And then his white part of his neck on this side comes down here, comes up a little bit, and then just kind of goes behind all of the red portions. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this a little bit because the red portion is actually in front and comes down like that. And then it comes up right here, sort of under his feathers of his face. So I'm not going to worry too much about all of my shadows and highlights yet, because I first want to get everything drawn on there as accurately as I can. So I'm still in that first drawing step on the gridding process. Now I'm going to go ahead and look at the eyes. So it's about 1/4 of the way over, and then it comes up a little bit and then goes out a little higher than halfway right up here, and then it actually goes a little bit wider than his face here. And then comes over a little bit here, and then almost straight up to this part. So that might be sort of the beginning of one eye. Very creepy at this point. And then the other eye starts almost on this corner. Comes up to a point right about here. Over and then down to that corner. And then comes out here, dips down into this next square, and then just curves, pretty sharp curve, and comes back up. And this actually may need to go a little further down. So So that might be sort of the beginning of both eyes. Right now they look very weird because I don't have any of the fur, the feathers around them. I don't have any highlights, shadows, any of that. It's just the shape. Because the first thing we want to do, even though these are technically forms, the first thing we want to do is just look for the shape that they make. So now I'm doing the red part that's up here, kind of dividing that into its separate sections. So this tuft of it comes above the beak, comes from the side of the beak and juts out about to here. And then goes up and in a little bit. And then comes, let's see. So part of it comes out here. Right about like that, and then another part of it comes in a little bit more, and then comes up and out right about to that line. So I'm going to erase this little bit. So there's not much erasing in the first steps, simply because we are focusing so much on the shapes that we have there. So then this one comes up. And then in this square, it comes back down. Comes very close to this spot. And then comes across. And then about the halfway point is when it kind of tufts out into a round there. And then goes behind his beak. So then this next one, well, this may actually be a little higher up and a little more to that side. That looks a little more accurate. Because then this next one comes up kind of from the side of it, but behind it. Comes over. And then this one comes up, comes almost straight down right here, and then over, and then just kind of fades into the rest of the red. So you'll see when you're looking at it closely, there's parts of it that are really clearly defined, and then there's other parts that are not. Just draw what you see. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but one of the harder things to do is if you see something fading or if something looks a little bit different than what you expect, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to draw what you see and not what you kind of think that you see. So right now, these all just kind of merge into this little shadow. It's red and it's pretty bright, so it's not like a shadow, but it is an area where all of those form one sort of space. And then these are sort of all connected as well. There are some shadows in here which help to define the separation of these, but not a whole lot. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and get sort of the white part here that is his feathers, and then that will also help define this space a little bit. So I'm going to start here with it, just because that's the clearer spot, and then it's going to come up. We've got a feather that comes up and goes towards that line a bit. And then most of this does just kind of come straight up. And then we're going to dip down because the red area above his beak sort of does start to overlap the feathers at that point. And then goes behind this red part that's directly on top of his beak. So I know that that's pretty light, so you might not be able to see that super well yet, but that's mostly because with feathers, especially white feathers, I don't want to make any of my lines too dark, especially not this early, because that is just sort of still the first of the drawing steps. So now looking at this rooster, we've got his outline drawn with 2 drawing steps. So we've done sort of the gesture on the outline, and then I've gone back in and tweaked the outline to make that as accurate as I can. And now what I've done is my first bit of drawing on the internal parts. There's no shadow, no highlights yet. We are focusing primarily on the shapes that all the different parts of his face and his beak and his little giblets and feathers and the shapes that all of those things make. So now this one would be ready for the second drawing step on the internal workings, which is just where we're going to do the same thing we did on the outline and just go through everything again, looking at it really closely to make sure that we are drawing it as accurately as we can. And I will take a video of that step and I will upload that probably either later on today or tomorrow, so that you'll have access to all of those videos for the drawing steps. Because our goal, as I had mentioned in class, our goal is to have everything drawn and ready for painting by Monday at the latest. So if you get everything drawn and you're ready for painting before Monday, then great, you can go ahead and start. But we will talk a little bit about the painting step first. So I will definitely talk a lot about the painting stuff on Monday, but I will post some information and reminders before that for those of you who get ready for the painting step before Monday. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully the videos don't bore you and they show you a little bit of how you can use the techniques and the process to improve your own drawing and observation.